In the heart of Eldoria, there once stood a great city known as Aurelia. This city was renowned throughout the realm for its grandeur, its wealth, and the bustling trade that flowed through its open borders. However, beneath this veneer of prosperity, a sinister undercurrent of crime and corruption had taken root. It spread like a disease, infecting the minds of men and tainting the very soul of the city. Fear became a constant companion to the townsfolk as they watched their world crumble under the weight of unchecked greed and unpunished injustice. Their hopes and dreams withered away like crops in a drought, replaced by a deep sense of helplessness and despair. In those dark times, it seemed as though Aurelia's fate was sealed. For in the darkest chapters of its history, when all hope had seemingly faded and the balance between good and evil teetered on a knife's edge, there emerged a silent guardian. He was a beacon of light in the encroaching darkness, a testament to the indomitable spirit of courage and justice. His name was Elias, and he was a blacksmith. Now, Elias wasn't just any blacksmith. He was a man possessed of an unwavering inner strength, a man whose spirit shone brighter than the midday sun, even though he himself was often cloaked in shadows. His humble abode was a small workshop tucked away in a quiet corner of the city. Here, amidst the rhythmic clang of his hammer on steel, he forged not only tools and weapons for the city's protectors, but also symbols of hope for the downtrodden and the desperate. Each swing of his hammer was a declaration of defiance against the forces of darkness that sought to engulf Aurelia. His tools were his weapons, and his weapon was his craft. He was not a warrior, but his hands knew the deadly dance of combat. For Elias had a skill, a lethal skill he had mastered in the solitude of his shop. He could fight with a simple hammer in hand, a tool meant for shaping metal, yet capable of delivering swift and deadly blows. One evening, as the sun began its descent, casting long shadows across the city, Elias finished work on a particularly intricate set of tools for a local woodworker. As he carefully wiped down each piece, a sense of satisfaction washed over him. Yet this feeling was short-lived, for as he stepped out of his shop into the gathering dusk, he found himself face to face with danger. It was a muggy summer night, the kind that breeds mischief and unease. The flickering gaslights painted dancing shadows on the cobblestone streets, creating an eerie, almost menacing atmosphere. And tonight, these shadows seemed to have a life of their own. Standing before him were 4 burly men, their faces obscured by the hoods of their cloaks, their eyes gleaming with malice. In their midst was a young girl, her face pale with terror, her body trembling like a leaf in a storm. Elias's gaze swept over the scene, taking in every detail. His eyes narrowed, his jaw tightened, and he slowly reached for the hammer that hung at his side. The leader of the men sneered at him, his voice a low growl in the stillness of the night. Well, what do we have here? A lone worker returning home, no doubt laden with coin. His eyes glinted with avarice, his gaze lingering on the bulge of Elias's purse. "Leave me and my money alone," Elias said, his voice betraying none of the turmoil that raged within him. He felt a surge of protective anger toward the young girl, her innocence and vulnerability stirring a long-dormant resolve within him. "Oh, I don't want your money," the man said with a cruel laugh. "I want the little girl. She's worth more than all the gold in your purse." With that, the thugs surged forward, their intentions clear. They wanted the girl, and they would stop at nothing to get her. Fear clutched at the girl's heart, her eyes wide with terror. But before any of the men could lay a hand on her, Elias moved. In the blink of an eye, he swung his hammer, a blur of motion that caught all of them off guard. The first thug only had time to gasp before the hammer connected with his weapon, sending it clattering to the ground. The second lunged, but Elias was ready. With a swift kick, he sent the man sprawling. Within seconds, the other 2 found themselves on the ground, their heads throbbing from Elias's precise hammer blows. The girl stood frozen, her eyes glued to Elias, her lower lip trembling slightly. The sight of the fallen thugs jolted her from her stupor. As she let out a shaky breath, realizing the danger had passed, at least for now. Elias turned to her, his expression softening. He extended a hand to help her up, his touch gentle. "Are you all right?" he asked, his voice low and reassuring. She nodded mutely, wiping tears from her cheeks. The thugs, nursing their injuries, scrambled to their feet and fled, their bravado vanished, replaced by the stark reality of their defeat. News of Elias's bravery spread like wildfire through the city that night. People whispered in awe of the quiet blacksmith who had become an instant hero. The girl's parents, frantic with worry, arrived soon after, their relief at her unharmed state evident in their tearful embrace. In the days that followed, more stories of injustice and petty crimes being thwarted by Elias surfaced. People came to him seeking not just his craftsmanship, but also his aid in dealing with bullies, corrupt merchants, and the small but pervasive evils that plagued their daily lives. And Elias never turned anyone away. He might not have craved the spotlight, but he couldn't bear the thought of others suffering while he remained hidden in his forge. A common refrain echoed through Aurelia: "Where there's smoke, there's fire." And the townsfolk decided to investigate. They gathered outside his shop, their faces etched with curiosity and admiration. And there he was, Elias, stepping out of his shop, not in shining armor, but in a simple tunic and trousers. His face was weathered, his eyes kind, and his hands, though strong, bore the marks of his honest labor. He saw the crowd and hesitated, unsure of what to make of their presence. "Elias," someone called out, their voice ringing with respect. "We know what you did last night. We saw how you defended us, how you stood up to those thugs." Another voice chimed in: "You don't need to hide anymore. You're our hero, Elias, the silent guardian of Aurelia." At first, Elias tried to brush off their praise. He didn't want to be anyone's hero. He was just a simple blacksmith trying to make an honest living. But the townsfolk wouldn't let him. They cheered, their voices echoing through the streets, their words carrying a conviction that left no room for denial. And so, whether he liked it or not, Elias became the symbol of hope for Aurelia. He didn't take on the persona of a masked vigilante, nor did he don a grand suit of armor. He was just Elias, the blacksmith. But his actions spoke louder than any costume or disguise. Word of his exploits reached the ears of the corrupt Baron von Hessler, whose greed and tyranny had cast a long shadow over Aurelia. The Baron summoned Elias to his court, expecting the blacksmith to cower before his power. But what he saw instead was a man who stood firm, unafraid. "You have become a thorn in the side of my rule," the Baron snarled, his eyes blazing with fury. "Your actions have stirred rebellion against me, and for that I will have you punished." But Elias stood firm, his chin held high. "You have no right to rule with such cruelty and injustice," he said, his voice ringing with conviction. "Aurelia belongs to its people, not to you." These words were a spark that ignited the flames of defiance in the hearts of the townsfolk. They rose up, their voices echoing Elias's sentiment, their demands for change resounding through the once oppressive halls of the Baron's court. In the end, it wasn't Elias's power or recognition that made him a hero. It was his unwavering courage to stand up for what was right, to protect the innocent and challenge the unjust, even when no one was watching. He was a reminder that heroism doesn't need a crown or a cape. It just needs a heart full of courage and a will to do what's right. The moral of the story: true heroism lies not in power or recognition, but in the courage to stand up for what's right, no matter how daunting the odds may seem. Sometimes the quietest hearts beat the loudest in the face of adversity.